Good evening. Excuse me. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to talk about the comprehensive plan and hear what's been going on, and we'll be taking testimony about what you would like to see included in our comp plan. So if you would join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please, we can start it with the meeting. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Okay, yes, Mr. Bond, please.
All right, once again, thank you for coming to this special meeting. Again, for the members of the public, I'm Nick Bond, the Development Director for the city, and with me tonight are Scott Bonjukian, our intern, and a student who worked on the initial outreach for the comprehensive plan update, and then Elle Davis, our Associate Planner, is off to the side running the audio-video equipment. And I just want to remind everybody why we're here. A couple of months ago, Council had some discussions about public involvement and where we're at in the comprehensive plan process, and after discussing it with the mayor, we thought, maybe the best approach, given the resources of the department, was to sort of recap the public process that's taken place to date, get some dialogue between the Planning Commission and City Council, and then provide an opportunity for public comment in conjunction with this discussion. And so, last meeting we had a presentation that really was an overview of where we're at in the process. All of all the inputs that have gone into the comprehensive plan and sort of the fixed variables that we have to deal with, and then what process was done, what decisions were done, and we highlighted a couple of two main themes: the connections theme and the local center's approach to growth. And the connections theme was every aspect of connecting the community, whether it's connecting citizens to their government, connecting different neighborhoods in the community to each other and to parks or other public facilities, and so on down the line. There's a whole section on that within the plan. The center's growth strategy was the other major theme, and we talked about, where are we going to put the 8,235, if I remember correctly, people that we have to plan for. And we talked about, there's a peanut butter approach where you just spread the growth evenly across the community, or you could concentrate it all in one area or something in between. And ultimately what was decided was that the existing developments that have been approved would take some of the growth, some of it would be spread around, and the rest of it would be concentrated into small local centers that would be more compact areas of development. And then the other things we discussed were the population and employment allocations that we're stuck with through the regional planning process, and those are the numbers we have to plan for. And finally, the buildable lands analysis that was done by the county that showed that we have sufficient land to accommodate the growth that we have to deal with. And at the end of that presentation, we had asked all of you to go home and read through the draft elements that had been prepared to date, paying special attention to the goals and policies, and coming back ready to discuss those, ask questions, and express any concerns that you might have, or suggest any new ideas that maybe hadn't been brought up to this point. So what I'd like to do is go through each element one by one, and that's the introduction, the land use, the housing, and then the economic development element. And I want to, I'm going to orally read each of the goals into the record so that everybody can hear them. The policies are far too numerous for us to sort of itemize those and go through them one by one. But if in your review of those policies you came across something that you have a question about or don't quite know why we might be doing something, I'd certainly like you to bring it up for discussion as we cover that element. I'm also going to ask, as we talk about each element, I'd really like to have a conversation where the City Council is sharing with the Planning Commission what it is that they'd like to see happen. And so I want to make sure that the Planning Commission is aware of the council goals and which goals the council wants to emphasize, so that they have their marching orders as they go back and review this and take it through the process. And then finally, on each of the elements as we discuss them, I'd like to conclude that discussion with an opportunity for the public to ask any questions or to give any comments on that element only, and then we'll move on to the next element. And so, as far as I'd just like to make sure that we try to keep things on subject, especially the questions that, if you have a question about transportation, that's going to happen later in the year when we get to those elements. And so let's try to stay focused, because I think this definitely could take our full 2 hours if the conversation becomes very robust. So the first element that I want to start with, and there I go again, forgetting to advance my slides. The first element that I want to cover is the introduction element. And before I actually, as we get into that, the introduction element is the only element in the plan that doesn't have goals and policies. It has, it's where our vision statement is contained, an overview of how the document is organized, and the center strategy is covered, as well as this theme of connections. But at the last presentation, I read into the record the targeted outcomes from that element. It's section 1.2 of your plan. And I'm going to go ahead and read those once again, and I would like to start by just being doubly sure that those targeted outcomes embody the sort of where we want to be in 20 years. And Councilmember Patanzu actually called me about this. He wasn't at the previous presentation, but he followed up on it, and he asked about the tense of how these were written, because they're written in a future tense. And these are really statements of what we've achieved in the 20 years since the plan was written. So 20 years from now, we want to be able to say that we have done this and we have become that. And so the first of these targeted outcomes is that the city has retained its small town character and strong community spirit. The historic downtown is more attractive and vibrant. More efficient patterns of development have reduced real per capita infrastructure costs. Housing has remained affordable, and the diversity of housing types has expanded. Walking, biking, driving, and transit infrastructure make it easy to get around the city. The city's waterfront and open space resources are highly enjoyed by the community. Community organizations are better empowered to coordinate events and activities. Citizens enjoy a comfortable and productive relationship with city government. Local businesses are supported by the community and government policies. And citizens are better informed and connected to the planning process. And just hopefully everybody noticed, but that's on the front page of the 6-page summary that we prepared for tonight's meeting. We wanted to really try to break down the plan into something that everybody could look at and study as we went through things tonight. So I guess I'd first like to ask the planning commissioners and council members if they feel comfortable with those outcomes, and or if there's anything that is missing from that list concerning the introduction.
I still struggle with the tense that it's written in. I like the outcomes, but I just, writing in a manner that states we've done it when it's what we're wishing to achieve or the outcome. The grammar to it I don't care for it.
So you want it to be future perfect tense instead of past?
Well, no, it's just that the city
Will retain?
will retain or wishes to retain. All of these, just the way they're written, it's like we've done it, and we haven't done it yet. And I know from my conversation with Nick, it's 20 years from now, but it isn't 20 years from now.
I think I agree with that, Nick, that writing in it is something attainable. It's better than saying we've arrived.
I would want to change the sentence that introduces the bullets rather than say we'll have achieved.
Okay, so
But the context, I'm fine with. It's just the manner it's written.
okay. And so together these statements all embody sort of a vision of Port Orchard. And so are there any other characteristics that have been missed in this that I guess council members or planning commissioners feel ought to be added to the list? Or
Well, I'm not seeing anything in those bullet points regarding economic development or jobs created in the city.
And I was just going to echo that some sort of a vibrant economy statement or economic engine statement or something like that. That I think we're all talking potentially Bethel corridor, but it doesn't necessarily have to be Bethel corridor. but-
Industrial park
Yeah.
and wage jobs.
There is one thing that I'm comfortable with, it's the fourth point. And I like it where it says housing's remained affordable and the diversity of housing types has expanded. But what I'm wondering about is can we, and do we want to think about the variety of housing styles being dispersed more varied? I mean, we don't want just like the wealthy housing in one area, the apartments in another. Maybe we would have them more well distributed.
Oh, that depends on zoning.
It depends, yeah. Maybe we could zone things
But
differently, but.
if you establish a vision statement like that, and you're wanting to, I guess what you'd be doing is trying to policies that implement that would be to amend development regulations to allow for a greater diversity of housing types within the city's existing residential zones. But I don't want to say that is the city's policy, but I'd like to hear if other planning commissioners or council members support that as a sort of the vision for the city.
I'm just gonna make a comment, and I don't know how it would work into this, but where Fred was concerned about all of the upper, the wealthier homes, the upper scale homes, higher scale homes be located in area. And I'm concerned about all of the affordable housing in one area and, for lack of a better word, creating planned slums in the future.
I know when we read a lot of when West Park was broken up, and the philosophy that I read in the paper was that they would spread that throughout the county, so you don't have pockets of poor neighborhoods, if you will, or economically challenged households. And that was just the philosophy then. I don't know if that still pertains, but certainly is that kind of what you were thinking?
Yeah.
It's gonna be a tough one to break up. I mean, that is what it is. I mean, you're not gonna have somebody making $12 an hour living in the larger homes in McCormick.
No, but what I'm
It's not
thinking
gonna
is, in a planned neighborhood, like, let's say there's one at Flower and Firemead or something, where we've had an empty meadow and now it's being developed. It would be nice if there was a variety of different kinds of housing there. Like, maybe the corner ones would be the large houses, and then maybe in the center would be some of the smaller houses. So you'd have a variety of houses in the same neighborhood, as opposed to them all being the minimum lot size. And I don't know how to encourage that, but it's something I think that we might want to think about.
Well, I think in terms of implementation, and this is going far away from the vision, but we have a planned unit or planned residential development provision of our code that allows for innovative housing designs where you can have a subdivision that contains some multifamily mixed with single family. And so you can get a mix of housing types through that procedure, but it's voluntary, it's not mandatory. And so I think ultimately the vision can say that that's what you're striving to become, but then the goals and the policies that occur in the housing element are going to sort of dictate whether that's something that you're really going to push or whether that's something you're just going to encourage. And so you can have that discussion later.
So is our vision potentially we're wanting a diverse housing mix in our subdivision?
So you want to mix housing types and housing incomes through the city is what it sounds like, and I haven't seen all of the heads nod enough to make me change this, but it sounds like at least a few of you.
Mine wasn't a statement, it was a question. That's what you're asking.
And I didn't mean to stress the socioeconomic. I was thinking more of the size of the houses. Let's say you have a 5,000 square foot house next to a 600 square foot house. But it would be nice if you had neighborhoods where they were both mixed. Some people may want the accessory dwelling units where their relatives could live. Or maybe you want students in the population with the more established families.
So maybe
No, and we can't, but at least if we would allow it to be
What the need is.
So we need to say something about the distribution of diversity in housing types. I
Maybe
think it's,
encourage it or something.
Well, I think you certainly need to be careful because as Rob indicated, the market's certainly going to drive things and we don't want to have mandatory requirements to where you're building houses that are either smaller than usual or larger than usual and have those end up where you build them and they're not marketable. So you need to be a little cautious to go ahead and input that information or requirements.
You know, I think the housing needs to recognize the dynamics or the changing trends. And it isn't necessarily related to income level, but it's just, there's more baby boomers that are looking for smaller things to live in. The millennials are looking for a different type of living versus another segment, and it's just kind of the market is driving it, but it's also the trends that are going, so.
Well, I think, I certainly agree with you, and as one that looks at those things, the market, certainly you are looking at what the trends are to make sure you're as marketable as possible. So, once again, we don't want to short-sighted do something to maybe a trend that's going to change a few years later. So I think we want to try to maintain as much flexibility and let the market and the trends follow where they may and will, and just allow the flexibility in the zone that's there, but not necessarily dictate either size or
But I think we need to have a system in place that will accommodate the market, if you want to call it the market or the trends, but that we can accommodate and encourage whatever that is, whether it's 3,000 square foot homes or 1,400 square foot homes. The market's going to drive it, but we need to make sure that we provide for it.
I think we're getting outside the scope.
yeah,
Sure.
of the vision, yeah.
And actually, you do have that written in, the land use policies, that's something that is written in, to provide a whole assortment of housing. So we are working that in there, and again, nothing can be mandatory. It is market-driven and it's need-driven, and as much as we think that we can plan for 20 years out, I doubt that we really can plan as much as we would like to. So much is changing so quickly. We're just going to scratch the surface probably on the needs for 20 years out.
So I guess I don't hear an additional targeted outcome or change to that fourth one. Okay. Are there any other questions or concerns about these 10 targeted outcomes? Is anything else missing or especially needed that it isn't there now?
Is there anything in these goals that, and I'm not seeing it, so maybe you can point me in the right direction, that kind of encourages employment development within the city?
Well, we'll get to that in the economic development element, I think. And it sounds to me that there's a pretty...
Targeted goal for...
Yeah. I think that the policy that was suggested about economic development and a vibrant economy, we can create a vision statement that speaks to that. And I saw everybody's head nod on that one. So I am planning to add a vision statement of that sort to this chapter, but we can get into the details of that in the economic development element. So I guess if there aren't any further comments or questions, the microphone at the podium is on. If anybody from the public would like to just comment on those 10, really broad vision statements that we have, and the 11th one that we've added on there, please step to the microphone and share any thoughts about what's been said or what is proposed.
So the 11th one will be economic development?
Yeah, and we'll write something and send it out. Okay, I'm not hearing any.
Jerry does.
Oh, Jerry.
I guess I was wondering, some of the things I feel are maybe almost college initiated statements. And I'm just wondering, especially as our country gets older, as far as our population right now, are there places on the East Coast that have already put some of these concepts into place, and are they already changing their minds? Like, I was a teacher, and the open concept had been tried all over the United States, but by the time it got here, many places had already moved beyond that philosophy, and we're going back to not having the whole school have no walls. And I guess that I'm just wondering, are we keeping track of what's actually happening in other parts of the country so that we're not following in the same footsteps? And it's already been tried and found that it isn't as perfect as it sounds like it's going to be. I'm concerned that sometimes new concepts come and they sound great, but other people try them and find the flaws. And have we actually done any research as to, has it been tried in place? And are they happy with the outcome versus, following in the footsteps and costing us a lot of money, deciding it isn't the right time?
I guess I'll respond to that briefly. I think that, number one, looking to the East Coast is not necessarily the best region to look to in comparing the growth patterns in the Northwest, which Seattle is about the fastest growing city in the country right now. You might look to the Southwest or I guess the West in general, and the Southeast is as far as what's been happening in other areas that have similar rates of growth and are expected to continue to grow at the rate that we're growing. But as far as what's been tried, I think that in places that are growing, this is all pretty common, and these are things that were generated by the community and through public participation for the most part. And if they aren't, they're very broad themes that are passed down through the regional planning framework or through Vision 2040, or even, I know we have a representative from Kitsap Health here tonight who also sat down and participated in this and is trying to encourage healthy communities. And there's other federal mandates that are around health, so things like the walking, biking, and active living type things are coming from those areas as well. Yep.
Dan Trusso, Sinskin, Home Builders Association, and this will come up probably several times, but on the issue of the targeted outcomes, and specifically your bullet, housing has remained affordable, and the diversity of housing types has expanded. On the surface, and at first blush, that certainly doesn't look like something to argue about. However, I alluded to this the other night when we talked about the plan, and I'll bring it up several times again. Is your goal to have all your housing remain affordable, or is your goal to be a community where all jobs have a place to go at night? Throughout the plan, you talk a lot about affordable housing, and it is certainly important to make sure that you have housing opportunities for every citizen in your community. And I'm not here to suggest you shouldn't. But later in the plan, you talk about using the Washington Code, the rule book, on defining affordability. So when I think about that in your plan and your definition of affordable, and I think about this as your goal, you're really not suggesting here that in 20 years you're going to have a robust economy, but rather you want to make sure that you are making sure there's housing stock that's, quote, affordable. So there's potentially a disconnect there in using that specific term. So I would just caution you to be aware of that. Be sure that's what you're saying is what you really mean. And if that's not exclusively what you mean, then we should probably find a different way to word this. Thank you.
I very much like that statement that Teresa made versus what we have. And what I heard was housing opportunities for every member of your community versus trying to create affordable housing in every segment of your community.
I like that too.
Mike Elias and Kitsap Realtors. First, I want to compliment John. I think it's very important to make sure in your plan you keep in mind that we can plan as much as we want. The mayor knows this, but market-driven forces are very important to the outcomes. So keep that in mind. And thanks to Beck as well. But in response to the first speaker, you don't have to go to the East Coast. You can look at the city of Bremerton. On Wheaton Way, the city adopted a whole bunch of smart growth policies that were very similar to downtown. And here's a good example of compare and contrast. They work well in downtown because you have commuters taking the ferry, they can shop, take bicycle paths, there's more high-density transit. But it didn't work on Wheaton Way, so this last year, the city of Bremerton repealed all of its smart growth ordinances on Wheaton Way because it's not gonna work, at least not now, to have a high-density residential, with the residential upstairs with the roof down.
I'm Rick Walt. I just had a question, and I apologize, because you may have an answer, that was at the last meeting. But, you know, we at least doubled the size of the city for annexations. And we have a lot of, you know, we have Parkwood and Confer Park. Is the comprehensive plan consider annexing those places as to expand our tax base? Or are we planning to just basically have the same footprint?
I guess in terms of annexation, I assume those are all residential areas?
Yeah, if you go to the top of Mile Hill, Parkwood is one of the older ones, and the Conifer Parks areas
Yeah.
were built in the 70s and 80s and 90s, and they're mostly family homes. They're all outside the city limits, but if you ask people where they live, they'll say Port Orchard.
I think that, and I don't want to speak on behalf of the council, but my experience in having studied other cities that have annexed different areas in their urban growth boundary, typically residential areas don't, they cost more to serve than they bring in tax revenue, the way that things are set up now. And so it's generally a liability on your books, and it's going to make the challenges of managing the city greater. But at the same time, as the city annexes commercial areas in the county, you're really putting the county in a difficult position because they're losing their revenue source and not able to provide the same level of service to those areas. And so I think the best practice really is, and what's encouraged, is a balanced approach to annexation. But just annexing residential areas as a source of tax base generally isn't a good idea.
There are commercial areas up there too, but it also would add to the number of people in the city, which would participation.
I'd like to try, to answer your question. I don't know of a list of annexation potential that we've looked at and talked about. It's always been my belief that annexations start with a group of folks that want to be considered for annexing into the city, and they make the application to the city. So it's community-driven more than council-driven, in my opinion, annexations.
Well, I'm thinking back to the McCormick Woods experience, Tim, and I'd have to disagree with you on that.
Well, yeah, but
but that was, I guess that was my question. Now, when you're doing a plan like this, are you basically assuming that it's going to stay the same size?
You do, I mean, there are numbers for the urban growth boundary, and they have been studied for what's the capacity of the urban growth area to take additional population. And if an annexation were to occur, we've got to incorporate that into our plan. And I think the approach that is really recommended is the creation of what's called a joint planning area or a joint planning agreement. And Gig Harbor has done this with Pierce County, where the city and the county have adopted concurrent regulations so that as development occurs in the urban growth boundary, it's consistent with what the city would allow, and the city has some input on what gets approved, so that the city may actually want to annex it in the future versus totally working independently of one another. And so I think, my recommendation to the Planning Commission and Council for the future, and it takes a lot of effort to put that sort of thing together, but in the coming years, maybe 2 or 3 years down the road, once this project is done, that may be something that they want to explore and work on developing with the county. And I think Paulsbo has that in place now for their UGA, if I'm not mistaken. But that would be a good strategy. And maybe the goal in this plan is that you want to explore that as a strategy for accommodating future annexations.
Okay, thank you.
Isn't it saying one of these, I read it somewhere, that we were supposed to look at this as it stands now and not include potential annexation?
For the Reverend Richard Brown, can you hear me? Because I can't hear anything they're saying, sitting back there. Maybe next time you can get a couple microphones on the table so we can hear you. First thing is smart. The only thing smart about smart growth is someday that it will be feel has done nothing for the community and has placed a burden on the city of Port Orchard by taking and forcing population on the roads that can't take them. The second thing I don't like about this process is what we didn't do last time. We didn't have government and some bureaucrat from Seattle come and tell us how to develop our city. And what we need to do is start this process over. Have a committee of citizens. Up there a few minutes ago, you had something that says, going to allow the citizens. You're not allowing the citizens to do anything. You should be listening to what we have to say, not bringing something to us 100% done and say, well, you're take it or leave it. That's the old way of doing things. Open and continuous is what the Growth Management Act says. And this is neither open or continuous. We should have started from where we left off, which was a great sub-area plan and a very good city comprehensive plan. And I see people that sat on that committee, and I think we were all satisfied, both business and the citizens. Thank you.
And it's, we're about a half an hour in. I want to try to keep it at about a half an hour for each element, and unless there's any further comments from council or...
I'd just like to capture Teresa's comment there again after I started to. I liked her statement much better.
About housing for all of...
Housing opportunities for every member of your community versus housing has remained.
Yeah, we can make some adjustment there. Okay, so moving on to the land use element, and as we mentioned previously, this is really the center and the heart of the comprehensive plan. There are a variety of goals. I believe there are 11 of them listed, and a lot of these came from the old plan and have been carried forward. The first of them is retain Port Orchard's small town commercial and residential character while accommodating allocated growth. 2, ensure that sufficient land is available for development to accommodate allocated growth in population and employment. 3, provide a variety of housing types and employment opportunities that cater to diverse interests. 4, establish, adopt, and implement a strategy to develop local centers. 5, ensure that both public services and infrastructure are developed in an efficient and cost-effective manner. 6, protect, enhance, and maintain the values and functions of Port Orchard's natural areas, open spaces, and critical areas. 6, reduce congestion and greenhouse gas emissions. And I'll stop right there and say that the greenhouse gas emissions policy is direct from PSRC, and we have to have those in our plan. So I don't want to get into a debate on that. So reduce congestion and greenhouse gas emissions, promote public health, reduce auto dependency, increase multimodal transportation opportunities for accessing retail services, healthcare services, and places of employment. Encourage new development of active, vibrant, and attractive places. 9, connect new and existing neighborhoods to each other, to commercial and employment centers, and to public facilities. 10, encourage the ongoing redevelopment of the historic downtown into an active, vibrant community, commercial, social, and civic center. And 11, maximize access to Sinclair Inlet. So, since these are the specific goals, which again, these are the sort of the broad ideals that govern each of the elements, and then within each goal, there's a number of policies that are action-oriented, I guess, things that we're going to do to try and implement those goals. And so I'm not going to get into all the specific policies, but if you've read this and have questions about any of the policies that are there, we're happy to try to answer those. But at this time, what I'd like to do, and along the lines of the Planning Commission getting some direction from council, of the goals that are listed, or personally, and I'm going to have Scott record this on the whiteboard, what are the goals that are most important to you as council members, or that that the citizens tell you are important to you? Because I want to make sure that the things that council would like to see are really emphasized throughout the plan.
I'll start out with number 3 is probably the most pertinent.
Okay. Yeah, just put 3 up there. What's that?
That's not a whiteboard.
Oh,
I'm just
sorry.
kidding.
This is why. I don't understand number 8. Could you be more definitive on what places are?
I guess that would be anything from parks to government facilities, neighborhoods, commercial centers. I think it's probably
The feel.
the aesthetics and energy of every little node in the community. But we can certainly make alterations to that if you have a suggestion.
Would the word destinations be better?
I would just more broadly speak of a community. I would say you want an active, vibrant, and
Instead of saying places, say communal nature. You don't want to keep it too vague, but you want to be kind of specific about, like you said, about like the different places, as in, community, homes, shopping.
any other thoughts on the land use goals that are here, or any things that any of you really feel need to be emphasized? Jerry?
Yeah, I kind of remember when I first ran for office, and we talked a lot about the downtown and maintaining the small town charm, and so I like that first one quite a bit, and I think one of the things that kind of robs us of that downtown charm is trying to stuff so many people into downtown that we can't accommodate parking, or it just becomes pretty muddled. I mean, we're already struggling with parking in downtown, so I always worry a little bit about maintaining that small town charm and how the downtown's going to look. And to me, the downtown is it's not necessarily the future, but it's what people see when they think about Port Orchard, and it's really important.
At the heart of the city.
Exactly.
Would you, do you feel that, I think goal number 10 relates to that? Do you feel that the language in 10 is consistent with what you've just said?
Yeah, I do.
There's some way 10 and 1 are almost, they're similar. Is there some way to
Well, actually, I think 1 doesn't speak to downtown specifically. It really talks about the small town character and residential character. And it's about handling the growth without changing the character of the community. And 10 is more specifically about the downtown.
Okay.
When you read number 2, to ensure that sufficient land is available, that's the specific zoning we're talking about, that we have enough land zoned for commercial that we can handle employment, and so much zoned for residential that we can handle the population. That's because I was figuring how we're going to get more land, and it's not getting more land, it's simply making sure the zoning is appropriate.
That's accommodating for the, 8.2 thousand?
8,200, yeah.
Did you guys hold the microphones? We're not hearing what you're saying.
Is that one blinking in green? Oh, hold it for about 3 seconds and it should go on. I think all of them should be green, but maybe check out your microphone.
If we speak up.
Green, hello.
There you go.
And if you turn the microphone towards you and. Okay. Did anyone in their review of the land use element have specific questions about any of the policies or goals that haven't been discussed this far? When you get into that element, starting on in section 2.8, there's about 20 or so, 30, actually 40 policies that are all to implement these goals.
Personally, I think policy 10 is rather vague in that it says the city should consider conducting a downtown parking study. In a lot of the other policies, they say should and shall, but then don't even put in the word consider. So I feel like that's, we might not. I don't know if that's really necessary. We might want to make that a little bit more.
I think on that type of language, the attorney is going to be reviewing this whole thing, and she's going to have a lot to say about what language you use where, because before I was hired at the previous city that I worked for, they had actually been taken to the hearings board over a condition in their comp plan that said that the city should consider. They did consider and chose not to do that action, and they were actually taken to the hearings board and appealed and lost. And so we need to be very careful about if we're forcing ourselves to do something or merely setting priorities. And so I want to get some input on that, and I wouldn't focus too much on that tonight.
It's just minute changes in words can make a big difference in
Correct.
whether it's a direction or whether it's a suggestion or anything like that. So.
Under policy 11, it indicates that I misread it, excuse me. Well, it says explore strategies to encourage existing development to provide the same as part of a city or region-wide trail and open space network. We don't have a city or region-wide trail network, do we?
Well, there is, I believe, through the countywide plan, and then there's the Mosquito Fleet Trail system that goes, I think 200 and something miles. And then also in our non-motorized transportation element, that's a mandatory element, is to provide a non-motorized plan, which is going to have some of those connections there as well. Do you have anything to add?
There's already a trail master's plan in the parks plan. I don't think there's any text accompanying it, but it's just a map showing those trails around the community. So,
How about the water trail that we're working?
Yeah, there's
That's
also.
a work in progress, that may soon become a reality that you, council people, will be accepting. So that would be another trail that would be countywide.
I was thinking more of a bike path or a trail from connecting our park system from the McCormick Woods Park, down to our waterfront trail.
And actually, I think there is a non-motorized project as part of the 6-year TIP, which is being updated right now. And I think it might already be in the parks plan as well. I'm not positive about that. I think, yeah.
Tremont's part of it.
Yeah, it ties into the Tremont bike lanes.
And then the boulevard drops it down.
So another, one of the main elements of the land use, or the main portions of the land use element, is the land use map, and I put that up on the screen. And like I said at the last meeting, we're not proposing any land use changes as part of the update. There is one goal in here, and this is when we talked about the need for a joint planning agreement. We've annexed a bunch of areas that in the county were zoned R30, but because the city doesn't have an R30 zone, they were down zoned to R20. And so there's the need to potentially remedy that, and I think, I believe it's one of the policies in the land use element speaks to that, but I haven't heard the need for any other land use changes to the map. There's no shortage of capacity for the buildable lands analysis, and so unless the council is wanting us to look at certain areas of the city, I'm not proposing to do anything unless our sewer, water, or transportation plan says this area, the roads that are there can't accommodate what that portion of property is zoned for. I've identified one small area where I think that might be the case, but I'm going to wait for our transportation engineer to look at the roads and what would be needed and whatnot. And that's actually, there's a little brown dot up here, and that's off of Melcher and I think Pottery. I think Pottery may have a different name there, I can't remember. Anyway, there's a large tract there. It's in the middle of a single-family area, and to me, putting a a whole lot of multifamily housing on roads that don't have sidewalks or shoulders or any infrastructure. You know, I don't know that that's the best place to direct that level of traffic. And I don't know that that project would be big enough to actually pay for probably a mile of full road reconstruction in the city. So that may be one area where we've designated something for R20, but it doesn't have the infrastructure capacity to handle that type of growth. But if there's any other changes like that, I think it's hard to study. There's a 11 by 17 land use map here, but you know, please let us know.
Well, if I could, talking about that land use goal number 10 in the historic downtown district, and then looking at the economic section and talking about changes to zoning and things, I guess I would question whether we're doing enough to try to redevelop and get downtown more vibrant. Looking at principle number 7, I realize this is the economic draft. The last sentence in there says, if needed, city redevelopment talks about reviewing and revising regulations, zoning requirements, and permit approval process. And I know that honestly the city was looking at a piece of property downtown and looked at that and made some changes regarding density and some other things to make it so it's a little more marketable and useful. And I think that same type of thought process needs to be looked at downtown to try to do some things to spur some development and act as a catalyst to get something going downtown.
Which section were you looking at?
And actually, I'm sorry, I was looking.
Are you on economic development?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry. But I'm just kind of with your land use changes and things and kind of tying into the downtown area. So I'm not sure what the thoughts are, but I know I've lived here quite a while and downtown hasn't changed a whole lot in that period of time. And if anything, it's probably become a little less attractive as opposed to more attractive. And it'd be nice to see things change. And I question whether the existing regulations are actually detrimental to the redevelopment of downtown. And I know that I think Nick had commented on, there's been a few people coming in looking for doing some work, and when they hear about the overlay district and the design review board and all the requirements, they backpedal and say, gee, you know, I can't do anything with that. And so I think it's probably time to take a look at that and see how we can maybe remove some of those obstacles and start moving so that we get a little bit of something new downtown to revitalize that.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, that's the type of thing that can fit into any of the elements of the plan. There are some policies in the economic development element that deal with that, but it could just as well be in the land use element, so it's certainly relevant.
Did we fix the density issue? Is that still
The Planning Commission has recommended that change. However, there's some other zoning changes that are coming forward, and I'd like to roll them all together into one rather than having, just for efficiency's sake, I want to try to combine those into one.
Can you speak to being done? And just go.
Well, it went through the planning commission, right. You know, and I know the issue of parking comes up, and you know, it's kind of interesting because I guess other than Fathoms of Fun and 4th of July, I really don't have a problem parking. And I think Mr. Murphy, the Chamber of Commerce gentleman, had commented that, you know, he's counted a certain number of parking stalls, and it'd be interesting to take that and do the math and see how much commercial development the number of parking stalls we have would actually support and what we actually have for commercial square footage downtown, and check and see, because I think some of that is somewhat of a bit of a misnomer, because there's an awful lot of parking down there. We don't have nearly as many people that park there that go to the shipyard like we used to, and so there's quite a bit of parking that's there. Granted, you might have to walk a little ways because it's not all by the road, but there's an awful lot of parking right there around the marina area.
Maybe there's
So
things we can do too with getting more of that commuter parking off our waterfront, and could help.
Mm-hmm.
With that, I would, you had asked us to talk about the policies, and under policy 22, I would question that. At the very least, rephrase it.
Yeah, that's a carryover goal, I believe, from the old plan.
Should consider.
Could.
Could consider. Might consider.
Could consider. Is it in this one?
Yes.
Just I know you guys want us to be involved, but not anybody can hear a word you're saying. I know you have those microphones on the table, but could you please put them to your mouths when you talk, because I'm looking around at my fellow citizens and not one of us can hear you guys.
Okay.
We should text to someone with the loudest voice and have them read it.
See, we don't know what you just said.
I was thinking we should text just the person who's the loudest.
Hey, Fred. I think that microphone there is facing the wrong way and it's behind some stuff, so.
This one's
They're
behind
on.
green.
I don't think they do much
When I
good.
speak, we'll switch. Can you hear me if I hold it to my mouth?
Yes, we can, thank you.
Okay.
I had brought to the attention under land use policy 22. I felt it needed either to be eliminated or reworded.
How do other council members feel about that?
I think so. I think there's more we could do with transit and potentially getting our commuters, more commuters off the waterfront. Parking that
To your mouth.
exists, the parking that exists available to the businesses, the business community.
Well, I was going to raise that issue as it relates to policy number 8, and one of the last bullets is encourage pedestrian travel to and within commercial areas by providing, and one of them is parking lot designs that provide safe walking routes. I think in addition to walking routes, transit access, because I know for a number of years when we've talked about parking downtown, there's been suggestions that, well, gee, we need to put a parking lot outside of the CBD and shuttle them down here by bus. Well, that concept can work if you position and encourage like park and rides at whatever, Sedgwick and 16, and have a good transit connection that can bring people to downtown. Doesn't necessarily have to be just walking from those parking lots to get them viable.
I think another thing we could follow up, include in here too, Paulsbo has incorporated some sort of a downtown loop, type route. So working with transit, developing potentially parking that's not in our downtown, having some sort of a loop versus the spurs that we're, currently. So I think it's working with transit is a component of somehow incorporating that into, I'm not sure if that's land use or where that would be.
Well, I think land use is a part of it because you've got to be able to encourage, or not encourage, but allow for the development of parking facilities that can serve. You talk about the parking downtown. I mean, personally, providing commuter parking on the waterfront for shipyard workers is a terrible waste of an asset. That parking needs to be serving the businesses downtown and the waterfront access, not commuters. Commuters is probably the easiest thing for a transit system to deal with, but you got to have somewhere for them to go. So you move them out of the CBD, put them in a parking lot, throw them on a bus, and that'll work for commuters as well as people that work downtown, but those are options.
Nick, I have an issue with density downtown. It's something that we've worked on a long time, and I don't know how to solve it. But when I see some of the suggestions for the density that's being proposed, number one, I can't even see how it could possibly work and keep the small town flavor that we're talking about or the feel. But it's 3 blocks. Our downtown is so small. And what we've talked about in the past in economic development is something that is more retail, more destination, more community-based, and then some of the higher density is a little on the outside of the actual downtown district. So I don't know exactly what you're proposing to change regarding density, but...
Well, there's a separate proposal with the development regulations that the Planning Commission has reviewed at the request of council, but what you're talking about right now, the downtown overlay district is zoned mixed use for residential above commercial.
Right.
And so for mixed use to be viable, there has to be sufficient residential density to support the construction of that type of building. If you don't want mixed use, you should change the zoning to commercial and not allow the residential uses downtown, or change the building heights to limit things to 2 stories. But right now, at 12 units per acre, most buildings you'd have, you might have 1 3,000 square foot unit on a second floor of a building. And that's typically not, if you're talking new construction, that's not a viable density to pay for going up an extra story on on top of commercial, where you have a separation of uses and the fire sprinkler requirements and other things that have to be paid for to build that type of building. So if you're talking about a shift in land use policy downtown away from mixed use, then now's the time to bring that up. But if you're talking about wanting to encourage mixed use, you've got to look at what's viable mixed use development and make sure that your regulations support viable mixed use development.
If I could comment. Greg Waller, I'm spending a lot of time in Pierce County lately. But down there, I see Lakewood Town Center, I see University Place Town Center. We didn't try to save downtowns. I don't know if our downtown can be saved, not in terms of making a residential use, a mixed residential use. I've lived here 35 years, and it frankly hasn't changed a whit. You have names changed on a building, if anything, it's going the wrong way. You have a half burned out building dominating Bay Street. So maybe the one aspect of this would be stop trying to make it a residential and mixed use place. It can still be there for social purposes, it can still be kind of a touristy kind of place. But if you really want to put up condos and have people live there and have a Whole Food Market next to it and a library next to it, maybe you ought to look at a different part of town.
I think so
Go
too.
to town center. And make it close to the highway so people can get to it. And stop trying to fix downtown, because you're not gonna do it. I've been here 35 years and it ain't been fixed yet, and if I stay another 35, it'll be the same damn thing. You're not gonna fix it. It still has a function, but this is never gonna be downtown Seattle or Pike Place Market. It's not gonna happen. So maybe you should be looking at changing the outlook, maybe build something a little more modern, a little more in the center of town, and where you really can build condos, and you really can build mixed use things, and you can have public services like the library and that kind of stuff, as opposed to trying to come up with a plan for downtown, because I frankly don't, you can change the parking and you can do a lot of different things, but it's never really gonna work, I don't think. I think downtown, when I moved here, was much more vital. That was 1978, folks. And it's not going to change. You're not going to go back to those days, I don't think. So maybe you should look at something, take a look at University Place Town Center, Lakewood Town Center, or Kirkland Town Center. Places where they have essentially taken empty space and built a town center there with services, with residential. And then keep downtown more as a place to have social restaurants, whatever, small shops. Just my thoughts.
Those communities are mixed use.
Well, if I could comment, the reason downtown hasn't done anything is because the height restriction we're eventually doing. If you actually could do something and put enough residential units on top, it would support something on the base floor. But because you can't go up at all, it doesn't support any type of use. That's why it has not changed, because we've always had the same height limitations in Port Orchard for a long time. I understand we have views and things we want to maintain, but one thing that I've always thought is perhaps you could take a section of it and go to a certain height that maybe could generate some momentum and be a catalyst, and then some things could go from there. But you need to be able to have a certain number of units to support it. And so if you look at a lot of the areas that are actually having mixed use, they have a number of units up top to go ahead and support the commercial uses down below. I think we should also look at it and say, why are we saying we can't have services and businesses only on the second floor? A nice office building in downtown Port Orchard wouldn't be a bad thing. We need reasons for people to come to Port Orchard. If you have businesses in Port Orchard, even if it's a service business, people are going to come to Port Orchard, they're going to stop, and then all of a sudden they're downtown, they're going to buy something, and it may spur some other things. I think as opposed to having barriers to what you can't do, we need to open things up into what we will allow and try to open that up and increase the market so that people have a reason to come into downtown. That's my 2 cents.
The only thing I would comment on that, if you go to Kirkland, go to downtown Kirkland on the waterfront. They don't have a lot of people there, but you're right. They have high rises. They're not really high, but they're like 8 stories maybe. They have a hotel there that's pretty large. And then they have the public spaces. And you're right, it brings people downtown. And I think trying to convert all of our old 1900 buildings, keep it 2 stories, I just don't see how it's going to work.
So before we go on with public comment, does council want to hear public comments, or do you want to continue the discussion before we? Okay.
Okay, did I step out of line?
No, it's okay. I just want to make sure. that
Hey, Nick,
everybody
I want to comment on what they're saying, because I think what you're talking about is, well, this isn't doing much, is it? Can you hear anything? Okay. I think what you guys are saying, I agree with some of it, and some of it I don't. And my problem with the downtown is I'm not personally ready to give up on it. And so I find it's like, I feel like it's a gift. Downtown is a gift. It's vistas and water and all kinds of potential. And I just don't think we should abandon that gift. I mean, lots of communities would love to have the ambiance that we have on the downtown. And so working through the issues of getting builders to want to build in our downtown, I understand that. I mean, we've got to do something, and maybe I'm concerned about the height of buildings, and maybe I need to give way on a little bit of that. But I also think that the downtown, I mean, we have to get behind a plan. And we have to decide what we're going to do. And John was talking about getting some of that parking off the waterfront. Well, if we get some of that parking off the waterfront, I'd like to see some expanded green space with the trail coming through there. I mean, we're going to give people a reason to come downtown, and it's coming now. Even that trail, even when we opened up that little spot in the park over there, I mean, I was amazed to see how many people are already walking through there on this tiny little section that's, to be much larger in the future. And I want to say that the downtown to me it's the thing that gives people pride in Port Orchard. It's the thing that people come here and look at. And when we had events here where we had people from all over the country come here, they didn't look at our town as run down or dilapidated or anything. They looked at our town as, wow, what a charming town, what a beautiful place, what wonderful vistas, things they don't even have where they live. So I don't want to abandon the downtown necessarily. Greg, I hear what you're saying, 35 years, how are we ever going to get there? But I say, that's why we're here. We're going to get there. We just have to not give up. I think building our waterfront trail in baby steps, for a better word, was the answer to that problem that all along people in this town have wanted a waterfront trail. And I think one of the obstacles to that was the cost. We just couldn't get that much money. But we decided a couple, 2 or 3 years ago, to go ahead and build it in segments, actually. And we're getting there. And those segments build energy all by themselves. And I think that trail and the touristy type things and the God-given things we have downtown are there ready for us to take advantage of, and we just need to do it.
I've lived in the area for 20 years, been a resident before in Port Orchard, and it's not changed at all to me either downtown. What comes to my mind is Albert Einstein's definition of insanity, and that's doing the same thing, expecting different results. So you either need to rip the Band-Aid off, try to do something different, or move on, because it's not going to change doing the same thing. That's just my 2 cents.
However, Gig Harbor has a historic downtown, and they've maintained their small town feel while developing their city center or uptown area. And they have kind of the best of both worlds. So we may not have as much area as that, but that doesn't mean that our little 3-block area downtown is going to drive all the economic development in this region. I think it's too small, and I think what we can do is work on it being, like you said, more of a community space. We may have to sink a lot of our dollars into that small area. First of all, we don't even own it. There's a lot. There's one person that owns the bulk of the downtown. We're acting like we can control that. We can't. So I think we still need to work on that plan for downtown and keeping it small and quaint. And obviously this discussion is going to go on. But more development in other places.
So, as we mentioned, currently the downtown is designated mixed use. And so I don't hear anybody saying they want to change the mixed-use designation, and so that's, if they don't want to change the mixed-use designation, the only thing to do would be to put some policies in place to either look at the downtown regulations, look at the density downtown, or something along those lines, but you're free to do that based on the goals and policies that are in place now. You could also add statements to this plan now, but I don't know that they're needed.
I think there's things we need to be doing, but I don't know that it's related to this land, to the land use component that we're working on.
I think we should probably take some public comments. I think there's a few people that want to go, and
Don Ryan, Kasan. This is regarding to the downtown core, and again, I believe what you're all saying, and I applaud you for wanting to look at this, because it's an area that has needed a lot of change over time. And I hear everybody's comments on trying to keep it very small, very hometown feel-ish, to attract people in the future. But what has happened as we look at regulations citywide is we look at pushing everything out because we don't want to change what we have in downtown. So we will take out a 25-acre forest to put up another big box, as long as it's not over 20, 30 feet tall, versus changing some of the density in downtown. Now, yes, we do have one owner that owns a lot of downtown, and that owner has very specifically stated he's not going to come to the city and ask to build a building. He's not going to ask to build a high-rise. All he wants to know is, what do you want to see in the future? Lay out a plan, and he'll build within that as long as it gives them, the return to help bring new civic communities, new town centers, and new residential, mixed use, and commercial into a zone downtown. Ready to help the city, ready to spend money on the city, and ready to redevelop downtown. They're just looking for some guidance on what you will allow them to do. The only problem we have is when we have discussions like this, we all want to fix the problem versus allowing free enterprise to help build the solution. And I just hope that you all kind of take that into consideration, because it doesn't have to be, a high-rise downtown. It doesn't have to be something huge. It doesn't even have to be residential. We've even talked about possibly bringing in a college to downtown, which would bring a lot of activity into downtown. It's just a matter of having some code issues that allows that development to happen, because with so many codes comes a very high dollar price that comes with it. And the one thing, I want to just comment on your comment, Cindy, and that is, with Gig Harbor being so close, we can compare ourselves to Gig Harbor, because we're starting to see a lot of Gig Harbor people come here. We talk to them all the time, bringing their kids down to the park, walking on the trails. I rode next to somebody on my bike the other day that was from Gig Harbor. They love coming here. But the city of Gig Harbor is built on a hillside. It's not built on fill. There's a whole difference in the dynamics of their construction costs and things too. So just keep that in mind. There's a lot of development that can happen in downtown Port Orchard if you allow it to happen in downtown Port Orchard.
Sure, I'll go. I got all kinds of things to say. Should go first. First of all, I've lived here for 50 years, and Mr. Baglio, things haven't changed much since when we were in high school. And the Einstein thing is it is a matter of doing the same thing, and I think the citizens want to do something different, but they're continually running up against a roadblock. So that was my first point. The other point is, if you notice in the economic development plan, 64% of the new job development is supposed to come from finance, insurance, lawyers. Last thing we need is another insurance agent, lawyer, or real estate agent in town, but that's where we're slated to get. And that's where, the idea of office buildings downtown and the mixed use is not a bad thing. I mean, that could be the answer to revitalizing downtown, is through that mixed use. Because, downtown is not a destination. It's not a destination for a lot of people, okay? People ask me, where can you buy a set of pots and pans? It's not downtown, unless you want an antique set, Okay, we need those big boxes, there's no question that we need them, but we need to make downtown either a destination or a reason to bring people in there if it's office buildings and whatnot. You read about the center concept throughout all of this, and the parking and the transportation, and that is definitely, you know, that through the three elements that we're looking at here right now, those are things that, that's a common theme for all of these things. And I've got, I pulled up a map of the South Kitsap Transit route. It starts in downtown, goes out to Annapolis and Olney, goes up Olney, all right, it goes a little bit further on Jackson, cuts around, goes around the golf course, drops back down to Bethel, and then back down to the waterfront. The other one comes up Sydney. What happens if you live on Baby Doll? Okay, if we're talking about density, and we're talking about getting these cars off the road, we need to increase. I mean, it'd be great to say that we had a bus stop at every other block. I know that's not possible, but you know, there are those things that, if we're talking centers, and we're trying to get cars off the road, it's not going to happen just by legislating it. Legislating that you're going to live here, you're going to shop here, and you're going to work here. That's not going to work, okay? My office is right on the waterfront, it's on Bay Street. I see people walking on that walkway all the time. It was a great project, it's a great asset, and the further we can push that out, the better off we're going to be. Let's see, my last point here, I think that was all of them. No, there is one more. It's written on this piece of paper. When we're taking into consideration the development of downtown and people coming to work downtown, are we taking into consideration the fact that people are taking the bus in? Okay, so when we say we're going to build this building and they've got to have X number of parking spots, which by the way, I did finish my preliminary study, there's almost 1,000 parking spots downtown between public and private territory. And anybody wants to come by my office and they can see it. Did Kim tell you about it? I mean, I only had part of it done when Kim stopped in yesterday, but I got it almost all done. I haven't identified all the public and private, but you know, if people aren't driving downtown, why do we need to have the parking spots for them downtown? We can save those spots if we have the transit and the carpools and not carpools, parking rights to bring people in, then we don't need as many parking spots downtown. Not that there's a shortage of them to begin with. Thank you.
Hello again. So I just wanted to, I've got a lot of things I'd like to say, and I think I'll probably write these down and send them in to you, Nick. But one of the things that I wanted to highlight is that when you look at the land use section, and at the very beginning where there's all the bullets, again, sort of these overarching desires for this section of the plan, there's no policy or discussion about a city that encourages development. And I'm not talking about just downtown, I'm talking about the whole city. There's really no discussion about that. And I know I'm not allowed to jump ahead, but I would just tell you that when you get to the economic development section, you're going to find there's not a whole lot of discussion about it there either. There's a real disconnect here. And what's important to understand is that development, well, carries with it some pains, and folks get worried and nervous about development. But the fact of the matter is that development's your cash cow. That's how government functions. Governments exist on the backs of the money that's brought in from development. And you, in your role as policymakers, obviously want to make sure that you have a say in how development goes forward, and that development's done in a way that's consistent with the goals and desires of your future and your community. But development's your cash cow. That's how you fund everything. Housing funds everything. Business development funds everything. So it worries me that, again, we're in a comprehensive planning process where there's really no discussion about how powerful development is to your coffers. There's discussion about the needs for infrastructure. That's important. You have to have it. And where the community is able to build infrastructure, private investment is much more likely to come. You ask the private sector to build that infrastructure for you, it may or may not come, and it'll come when they believe the market will bear it. But if you can invest in the infrastructure, you will improve the likelihood of development not only coming, but coming where you want it. So it's really important that you understand that. But really, I'd love to see some true disclosure in your comprehensive plan about how powerful and important development is to the economic condition of your community and how much money it brings into your coffers. Development not only pays because it buys permits, but permits are perfunctory. Really what development does is it brings in tax revenue. Development, construction, pay a lot of sales tax. And then when the building's built, there's property taxes generated from that. And then the occupants of those buildings, whether it's commercial or residential, are spending their dollars in circumferences around the community or the designated area in which they've built or moved into. So it's extremely powerful. That's why when you hear on the news at night, housing starts, it's always a major economic factor in any news report. What's the status of housing starts? The reason that's so important is because of how powerful housing is. So I'm very concerned that the plan has this significant disconnect and that you, as policymakers, aren't being given a fair opportunity to fully appreciate how powerful and how important a robust construction industry within your community is going to be to ever realize any of these other aspects of your comprehensive plan. So with that, I'll just end there, but there's lots of things I've made notes on, and we'll have to send a letter because there's a lot of things I think that you should be considering. Thank you.
I really appreciate this opportunity for us to brainstorm. This is great. I had one question on number 10 on the land use goals, where it says encourage the ongoing redevelopment of a historic downtown into an active, vibrant community. From my standpoint, questioning whether that retains the historic downtown part, or if that is total redevelopment. And as for myself, I would like to see the history of downtown maintained. I think the rest sounds great.
So I think I hear you saying the respecting the historic context of downtown.
Yeah,
But,
that sounds good.
okay, so we got time for one more, and then we really need to get moving on. We're about 20 minutes behind schedule here, unless everybody wants to stay a little later.
Since I've lived here all my life, all 76 years, I think John's just a little bit behind me.
A lot behind.
This conversation that we've had this 1,000 times if we had it once, over and over and over again. Orange is a weak city. When I helped do the second stage treatment plant, none of the money was saved from hookup fees, so the city wasn't even on the even keel with Sewer District 5. They'd have no money. And that's what's wrong with downtown. They have no money. And businesses are dropping over because the city can't afford to help them. I went and built a shopping center in Swim. And they bent over backwards for the developer in Swim. I thought I was in a different world. That's what the city of Port Orchard needs to do if anyone wants to redevelop downtown. And they need to quit fooling around with Bethel Road. Bethel Road is the main corridor that we could put a $350,000 a year big box tax revenue in. You're currently collecting $1,600,000 approximately, and $600,000 of that was supposed to be set aside so we could retire bonds. That did not happen. You bought trucks with the money last year. Now you're going to patch the road. We can't get on or off Bethel. If you really want to make some money so you can do something with downtown, then widen Bethel so we can put more businesses on there. You drive down Bethel, it used to be worth $10 a square foot. It's maybe worth $5 a square foot. Now, when we started, the road was going to cost $18 million. It's now $33 million, supposedly, in your traffic study. That's not true. That was figured at $10 a square foot when the county did it. Well, it's less than probably $5 a square foot right now. So we're looking at probably 15 to 18 million dollars. If you want tax revenue, then you need to keep your word to guys like me who went out and got the voters, the property owners to sign up to go in the city, then you betrayed us. You didn't spend a damn dime on Bethel Road. I understand you're gonna spend $300,000 on it, but that's patchwork. You will not be able to get on or off Salmonberry Road, whether you spend the $300,000 or not. You gotta figure out how to bring more business to Port Orchard. And I know that you refer to this waterfront down here as downtown, but where is really downtown? Is it at Sedgwick and Sydney where most of the revenue is coming from right now? It certainly isn't down here, but you're not going to be able to help the people down here if you don't figure out how to get someone to come in to redevelop your city that's falling in the bay. The other thing is that the property owners made a deal when they gave the property to the port that parking would not be taken away from them. Well, what we need to do is Larry Coppola's idea of building a parking garage to get some of those Navy Yard workers out of there. We built the bypass because we couldn't get through town. There was no way to get into town, so everybody left at 3:30 in the afternoon. We built the covering over the sidewalk because we figured out that maybe people didn't want to get wet. So we've done all kinds of things for downtown, but one thing we haven't do is given them enough incentive to rebuild the waterfront with enough money from the city to help out and enough cooperation. You need to put higher buildings downtown, and I know that there's people in this room who own property on the hill. But if you want to redevelop downtown, you're going to have to increase the density. That's all there is to it. And I appreciate you allowing me to talk.
All right, we really have to move on.
One comment?
Mayor, you're the chair of the meeting. All right.
Can you make it real quick, please?
15 minutes.
And since everybody's dropping how long they lived here, it came to my mind, unless John's still on the city council in 2035 and Dick's in the audience, these documents, will you write support? Because the day's going to come, he's not going to be planning director, you're not here, we're not going to be here. So what I'd like to suggest is you number your goals, is to please consider putting at the top, not necessarily listed in the order of their focus, unless you plan on prioritizing which ones want.
Good comment. Thank you.
And
Okay, we probably really should move it if we're going to get through the program.
Take a look at Seabrook, down at Pacific Beach. They built residential above commercial, mixed use, just like we're talking. They went up one level. Seabrook doesn't start until something's bought. They don't pour a foundation, they don't clear the land until it's ready to be built and they know what they're going to build. So it can be done with just one layer of condos above commercial and still make money. We don't have to look like downtown Bremerton. That's all I got to say.
All right, moving on to the housing element. Once again, I'm going to go over the goals. We've got about 35 minutes left on what we scheduled for this evening, and so try to move quickly. Housing goal number 1, ensure that the city's housing stock accommodates desired housing types based on changing demographics and growth. 2, ensure affordability and accessibility of all housing for all economic levels in the city. 3, promote the efficient provision of municipal infrastructure and services to new housing developments. 4, promote the efficient and innovative use of land in order to maximize land potential. 5, formulate and implement innovative design regulations and design standards that maintain and strengthen neighborhood character. 6, maintain the time associated with processing and improving proposed development while ensuring that housing and design standards are suitable for maintaining an efficient, attractive, and safe housing supply. 7, maintain ongoing support to homeowners to preserve, maintain, and improve their properties in order to enhance the quality and character of neighborhoods and the overall city. And 8, ensure that future residential developments protect and maintain natural ecosystems, including wetlands, streams, and wildlife habitats. So once again, I'll ask the council members and how you feel about the 8 goals that are developed. Some of these have carried over from the previous plan, but are there questions and concerns about these that haven't already been expressed as part of the vision statement, which we adjusted the vision to talk about providing housing for every member of the community as opposed to specifically talking about affordable housing.
Yeah, that's what he's talking about changing.
There's a lot of interest about this earlier.
Nick, how do you go about doing these things? Is the comp plan ever deal with the how rather than the hope?
Well, in terms of the housing element, and I think as Mr. Brown alluded to, if the city wants development to happen, it has to put money into it. And the same way, a lot of affordable housing policies take investment by the city. There are some limited things that the city can do through its development regulations to ensure that affordable housing stocks exist. I know that we've heard the Home Builders Association speak against like an inclusionary zoning policy where a certain percentage of units have to be affordable. There are other policies, density bonuses for developers that provide affordable units. There's all sorts of incentives that you can build into your regulations to make sure that that a variety of housing stocks are built. And as we also mentioned, the diversity of housing types is really important. And in our planned unit development ordinance, it allows for a mix of housing types, not just all single-family houses or all multifamily, but doing creative developments that might include some cottage housing, some townhouses, some single-family houses, and an apartment building in a commercial mixed-use center, and allowing for that type of development to go forward where just by creating a variety of housing types, you're creating those options, and some of them are more affordable than others. But I don't think Port Orchard is big enough to really put a whole lot of money into affordable housing, and I know that we have the Housing Authority, and Mayor, I believe you're involved in the board there. And they, all the federal grants that come down for providing affordable housing go through the Housing Authority, and so that's not really within the scope of work or the city's scope of providing housing. Really, we just manage the regulations that affect housing and try to keep development costs affordable.
Nick, I guess I have a reaction, probably a negative reaction to the issue of affordable. And as a comment made earlier, like goal number 2, ensure the affordability and accessibility. I know affordability is different. Why doesn't it just read ensure the access or accessibility of housing for all economic levels in the city? I think that's more certainly what I would be interested in. I'm not trying to exclude affordable housing, but I don't think that we need to just focus so much attention on it. I think there needs to be a variety of housings, and we need to encourage whatever. And I guess it gets back to the market issue.
Tonight I did bring with me the PSRC Vision 2040 checklist and the Department of Commerce checklist that we have to submit the plan for certification at PSRC and for review to Department of Commerce for compliance with state laws. Under the housing element, there is actually language that's somewhere between providing affordable housing and providing housing for all income levels and demographic groups. So a lot of this is mandatory, but we probably, it sounds like using the words provide affordable housing versus providing housing for all citizens is something that's kind of a consistent theme throughout the plan. And so I think we need to review the exact language that's in the state law and in the checklist and the regional policies, and where we can make it fit that sort of phrasing.
Again, I'm not trying to exclude affordable housing as it's how I interpret it, but on the other hand, I don't want us to focus all of our attention on it. I think there needs to be a good balance.
I think it comes back to Teresa's earlier statement. It's opportunities for every citizen,
You know, I guess I'll just, it's kind of the elephant in the room, but this was a number of years ago. I looked at the demographics of Port Orchard and South Kitsap with some of the census data, and I think we probably are leading the county in quotes, affordable housing. The city of Bremerton used to, but then they, shall we say, dispersed West Park housing and spread it around more in the city. But if you want to look at the concentration of affordable housing, we've taken our fair share.
And I think it's also important in the plan, and we will definitely, I think we hear you loud and clear about changing that phrasing, but a lot of times when you have affordable housing, affordability of living in the community because you're either driving further to your jobs or to the services that you need or for shopping opportunities can sometimes offset those. And so, you know, you also have to consider the affordability of living in your community and not just solely the housing cost, but it's also the mileage driven, the fact that you may have to own a car to get around or the transit's not available and those things too. So I think that's an important theme to consider through this chapter.
What does number 7 mean? Provide ongoing support?
So, well, I suppose, I guess an example of that is our code enforcement officer, when we find violations where people haven't been able to keep up with maintenance, we work with waste management and provide vouchers for people to take materials if they have to get rid of debris and things that might be in their yard. We've organized volunteer cleanups of houses and, you know, community sort of events. And so I think generally we need to keep tabs on what's happening in terms of property maintenance. And when it's an enforcement issue, we enforce it. But when it's somebody who's in need and needs help, we try to direct them to the resources that they need. I don't know that there's a real specific policy that necessarily backs that up, but
well, there's several. We have a community policing outreach, which has helped 2 or 3 times in the last year that I can remember, where people were having difficulty maintaining their property. Normally, these are older folks with some kind of injury or something. And in a couple instances, the police took those on as a community policing project, which is it's not mandatory, but it's recommended that they take on a few of these each year, and they help. You know, I think a lot of it is connecting the right help with the right problem.
You know, Nick, I kind of see what Annette's talking about a little bit, because when I'm looking at this number 7, it almost feels like it should say encourage homeowners to preserve, maintain, and improve their properties. Because, I mean, is the goal of this number 7 that the neighborhoods would take care of their properties and maintain them and be attractive and not let their properties get run down? Is that what number 7 is supposed to do?
I think it's
saying that we're going to help them do that?
I think it's 2-part. I think if you look at Housing Policy 23, which reads, consider developing programs that encourage and assist property owners to improve the quality and aesthetics of their housing units. I think that one sort of ties into that, but again, I think this may be a carryover from the old plan, and I don't know what the context was when this was created or what sort of public feedback might have led to this, but that's my reading. And I'm kind of flipping through here to see if there's any other policies, but I agree with you that potentially the goal needs to say encourage the maintenance and upkeep of existing housing stock, and then maybe provide homeowners who have difficulty with some assistance, or maybe it's we need to have a policy that would kind of be a safety net for parts of town that may have houses that are in disrepair, or I'm not sure though. I guess I'd look to you for direction on that.
I'd like to bring up something that may be addressed in number 5 and number 7. These are almost after the fact to me, because I'm thinking you may have a great development regulation design standard. The problem that I'm wondering if we can address is if you look at Sage Court, where the roads are very narrow and the houses are close together, and we're finding that some houses have 5 cars parked on their front lawn, is that something you can address?
Well, yeah, and our regulations address that, and I think that, number one, we have a limit on how many inoperable cars can be on any one property. Inoperable or unlicensed, and that's, you can have 1 inoperable car. As far as operable cars, there are no restrictions, and I know that some communities require that all parking areas or maneuvering areas for vehicles be, constructed with pavement or other materials, and we don't have a standard like that adopted. And so that's probably something that we need to look at in terms of our design standards for when homes get built, that all parking areas are paved, and then it's actually a zoning violation if you are parking in an area that's not, a paved parking space. But you got to remember too that for existing areas of town where you have people that might own boats or RVs, I mean, for them to pave something where they might have something on the side of their house, or even you see the carports that are built that are sometimes on the side of a house in a grassy area, that requires stormwater considerations and pavement costs, which are quite high. So that's potentially a pretty big burden on residents too.
Are some of these goals carryovers from the previous comp plan?
Yeah, I think a lot of them are.
If they are we doing them now?
Well, the question is, do your regulations do them now?
Yeah, I'm just wondering.
So, and typically what happens when you pass a new plan is once the plan is adopted, you need to go through and do a consistency evaluation with your code and figure out, in what areas is your code falling short of implementing your policies. And I don't know that was ever done after the last plan was adopted, but it's something that we're currently working on. We're working on that concurrently with this, but depending on what the final language is, we will still need to go through and make sure that we implement these things through updates to our code.
Well, I like Jerry's comment about number 7, be more encourage homeowners to preserve, because that really, I like the idea that we're helping out those who are having a tough time, but I think in general we need to encourage people to maintain and improve their homes. And I'm not sure what that means, how you do that. Get a free building permit or something, I don't know, but I think that's something that we should strive for.
It's a more positive outlook. It is.
During Cedar Cove days, we actually had articles in the paper saying, hey, we've got company coming to town, let's all plant our yards and make it nicer and make it look better. During the Christmas season, we tell them we're coming around and encourage them to put up lights and decorate the neighborhoods and have a community spirit about things. So there's a way, we can do it, yeah. So,
Yeah, and ultimately, I think there are policies that you can put in place that are regulatory, and there's policies you can put in place that require the city to expend funds. And you sort of have to make a decision about whether because the budget has to be consistent with the plan, you have to be careful about committing yourself to funding something that you aren't in a position to fund. I think, I suppose if there's no other council comments, we can open up the housing element for comments from the public. Has everybody gotten everything they want to say out? All right, come on.
This young lady does.
Yeah.
Hello again, thank you for your tolerance, I appreciate it. So on the housing chapter, and you already know this, I have concerns about the emphasis on focusing on the affordable side. I appreciate that, I think you've heard me and you understand my point, and I really appreciate that. And Nick, I will be interested to see what you find out with regards to what has to be in here versus what kind of sort of local flavor you can put on this. Maybe this is a spillover exactly from being a part of the PSRC, which is heavily urban in their thinking, right? And I'm not here to complain or make disparaging comments about PSRC. There's some good reasons to be a part of that, but this might be one of those sort of unintended consequences of that, and that they look at things from a big city's perspective, and this is a small town. So I wanted to share with you a little bit of data. The Bremerton Silverdale municipal area, we have data for. So let's just presume we're pretty close to that in terms of how it is here versus how it is across the inlet there. And in Bremerton, according to the National Association of Home Builders data, this is an affordability index that's done in concert with Wells Fargo every year. 71% of folks making median wage can afford to buy a home in this area. It's pretty darn good, really, compared to the national average. So then you look at the predominant area of the PSRC. Look at that's Bellevue, Seattle, Everett. Okay, and they have lots of these programs for making sure you've got affordable and inclusionary zoning and all these other things that they've done over the years to try to equal the playing field. And with all of that effort, they're at 51%. Okay, so you're not Seattle. You're your own unique place. And I would just encourage you to take the opportunity in your plan to maybe identify your difference, justify your plan in how you're responding to any mandates you might have from the PSRC. I think you can do both. I think you can answer their question and explain that you're aware of their expectations, you've considered what they'd like, but that you're aware of your demographic and your housing situation and what the community needs here. That's what I'd really love to see, rather than what kind of feels like boilerplate stuff being stuck into this plan. I'd really like to see some thought given to that. So I wanted to just share that with you. And then the other question I had, and Nick, I don't expect you to have an answer right now, but just, I was a little bit surprised to see the volume of multifamily permits that were pulled in 2012 and 2013. It's on page 3-1. So, and especially given the discussion just above that table about where development has been occurring, which of course the annexation influenced a lot in terms of how the city's development has happened, and most of the development has happened in McCormick Woods, but yet to see this really high number of multifamily, so I'm just surprised by that. And I'm questioning if that's accurate.
It is accurate. That's at the intersection of Sydney and Sedgwick, and we've had 200+ units constructed.
Okay, so it's per unit, it's not per development. So you're treating.
You're talking individual units in the
Okay,
complex.
so you're saying permits per apartment, not per complex.
Yeah, I guess that can say units instead of permits. So.
And that's fine. The table was not new, and so I was very surprised. And I was imagining a lot of quadruplexes somewhere. Okay, so that was good to know.
Well,
And
it's
then,
multi-units.
the other thing I would just again point out is, it's interesting because you guys have really covered a lot of the things that I had circled and highlighted. But the other thing I just point out is goal 6. Your goal is to maintain the time associated with processing and improving proposed developments. How about we have a more exciting goal, like to improve the time, to reduce the time, to encourage development to come here and to be the place in the South End that everyone wants to come and do business? Let's try to compete with our competition, like Gig Harbor and Silverdale. So I'd really love to see a goal that's not just status quo, but let's shoot for the fences. Let's do something exciting. So again, I have more comments and I'll put them in writing. Thank you very much.
What percentage is Bainbridge Island?
Well, what?
What percentage is Bainbridge Island?
They're not an MSA. They might think they are.
My name is Clancy Donlin, and unlike a lot of people in this room, I'm a new resident. I've only been here a couple of years. I envy people who have been here most of their life. It's a very cool town. Earlier, there was a subject discussed about mixing types of housing, and it seemed that nobody had a reference. I can tell you there's about 20+ years ago in the city of Sammamish, before it was the city of Sammamish, I lived in that area, and there is a mixed community. There's a community that has apartments, townhomes, regular homes, and they have some very high-density apartments. And it was a developer that did this. It was an unincorporated area of King County. But they mixed all these in one area called Tla'ani. And I encourage you to check that out and check the city of Sammamish and see how that worked out. If you're looking for some kind of guidelines, because it was done, it seems, I knew some people who lived there, it seemed to have been done quite effectively. And then one thing I'd like to talk about, I didn't get a chance in the last subject, I'd like the approval just to make a comment about the downtown area. About a month and a half ago, Karin and I, my girlfriend, went to the east side. We went to Kirkland and we went to Redmond because both areas have had some downtown development, some dramatic development. And we took photos. I also lived in Redmond before. And we took photos of Redmond with their development and some of their housing downtown, which has mixed use. It has retail below and apartment or condos above. Redmond produced some buildings, quite a few, that are 7 and 8 stories. Kirkland is 4 or 5. And the difference is dramatic. But in this downtown area, in Port Orchard, it's very akin to Kirkland. They both have only a few blocks of downtown area. They're both built on fill. And Kirkland developed a plan and exercised it on mixed use. And it looks very nice. I encourage you to check that out. But about downtown Port Orchard in particular, it's one of the things that attracted us to the city. It has a great charm, but it really needs some help. And it needs to be developed. It needs to be, the regulations need to be streamlined. And I challenge the city leaders to dazzle us with brilliance. Focus on making it attractive to developers. It's, Teresa, said it very eloquently that that's the engine. Development is the engine that drives the city, that fills the coffers. And that downtown could be, with good planning and creative people, you can preserve the flavor of downtown and still develop it. You just need creative people who want to do that. And I encourage you to do that.
I think we got time for one more if there's any other comments.
Hello, my name is Yolanda. I wear 2 hats, but right now I'm wearing my resident of Port Orchard hat. And I wanted to throw in there the discussion about affordability. I don't think of it as a negative connotation. I am actually a nurse. My husband's a teacher. We own a house. We have 3 kids. And we don't feel that there's a lot of options around affordability for us, and we're not what some people would be concerned about in terms of low income. But I just want to throw that the word affordability doesn't necessarily need to be connected with a negative connotation. I think it tells us what we want to say really clearly about our community, and that we should have, I think everybody has a right to housing. I think 70% is low. I think 100% of people should be able to have the ability to buy houses. So I just want to throw that out there and to share that as part of the conversation. Thank you.
Yeah.
I have just a comment on the housing element, and I think the land use element and all of them. When you go through the policies, I would like to see them updated. Many of them are just a continuation from the old comprehensive plan, and I think they could use some updating.
Okay, I think we'll move on to economic development, and we may run over by a few minutes, but do our best. As I did before, we'll read the economic development goals, and before I do that, I just want to mention that this is the element that was not done through the public outreach with the university students. We've done this through our own outreach using what limited resources we have, and so we did surveys of downtown. We met with KEDA, we engaged other community organizations, and we did have a hearing before the Planning Commission, though there wasn't a whole lot of attendance. So this one requires maybe a little bit more vetting. One of the council members has already met with us and brought up a number of issues that they saw within this element that need to be fixed. And so we've started making revisions to this that are a little bit more heavy than the other ones, but I really want to focus on the goals as really making sure that we have the goals straight. And if you have suggestions for policies, I'd love to hear them, but I don't want to get too involved in the language that's there because they're going to be updated.
Yeah. Is that part of this? Because ours ends with.
Separate document.
I don't have that. Okay, so
Page 7.
getting into the economic development goals, goal number 1, support a vital, diversified economy that provides living wage jobs for residents, supported by adequate land for a range of employment uses, and that encourages accomplishment of local economic development goals. 2, encourage new commercial development to occur within designated centers of activity near housing, multimodal transportation connections, and urban services. 3, encourage economic growth and diversification that maximizes employment, leverages the strength of the national defense industry, and improves the opportunity for residents to work and live in the same community. 4, promote and support a healthy, diverse economy that provides for a strong and diverse tax base, maintains an industrial base in Port Orchard, and encourages retention, attraction, and expansion of business. 5, increase residents' ability to enjoy a high quality of life and access to healthy living opportunities such as locally produced food, nearby grocery stores, parks and open space, safe streets for walking and bicycling. 6, balance business and industrial development with environmental protection that is in a manner that enhances the quality of life in Port Orchard as it grows. 7, coordinate economic expansion that is concurrent with capital facilities, multimodal transportation networks, and urban services, especially within designated centers. 8, foster and facilitate partnerships and cooperation among government, private corporations, and nonprofit entities to promote economic development goals. And 9, attract and encourage the expansion of educational and medical institutions to assure a highly skilled workforce. Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. Apologies. Oh, did you?
Yeah, you're missing a number in 7.
One of these is not.
Okay, thank you. So, generally speaking, the goals that are here, I think we had some initial discussion in the targeted outcomes and vision, speaking to economic development and a vibrant economy. I think generally those vision statements are supported by these goals, but if there's anything else that's missing, or if you have comments about these, please let us know. Yep, Cindy?
This is just going back to principle number 4. Okay. Yeah, I'm backing up a little bit.
Page? Yeah.
Just page 8 of 14. The city needs to continue and expand its events and promotions, and you've listed some successful events. But there's one that's missing that I think needs to be added, and that's the Festival of Chimes and Lights.
How could we miss that?
I don't know. So if you could add that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Actually, that particular section that she's talking about, which page were you on? 8?
8.
Okay.
Principle number 4.
Right, that particular section of those principles is from the EDA plan, and I personally didn't think they belonged in. I thought the whole EDA plan should be adopted as an appendix and not portions of it put in the introductory part.
And to look at the language to provide effective events and promotion, how about support? I don't think we're providing the event as a city.
Well, should we take these? should we take these out of the plan and rely on them as an appendix and just adopt the EDA as an appendix? Or would you like to see them in there with some amendments?
I support the EDOT, putting it as EDOT.
As an appendix.
Yeah, Jerry?
And I'd like to add to that, actually, one of the things we talked about at KEDA, about the economic development elements of the comp plans of the various entities, was the lack of a tourism element. And this is kind of where that would come in, the effectiveness of tourism and drawing people to your area and encouraging economic vitality. I've always said tourism is economic development and travel flows. It's people coming in, spending their money, providing excitement and vibrancy, for a better word, that encourages the community and makes it feel good about itself. The word goes forward, people hear about Port Orchard.
So we need an overarching goal.
Has to do with economic development and tourism.
So tourism is one of the components of economic activities in Port Orchard. We'll come up with something surrounding tourism as a goal. I think that makes sense.
If I could. So the goals are fine, but obviously trying to make sure they're achievable. Once again, going down the regulations when it comes down to the nuts and bolts of it. So maybe we should add a goal that says it's our goal to implement some of these goals. I'm just kidding. But anyway, it's important that we go ahead and do, like I said, this is big picture stuff, but this does filter down, because to achieve that, just like we talked about, the idea of coming through and having the overlay district and all the other requirements, that then makes people turn away from actually doing any development. So we need to keep that in mind when looking at the nuts and bolts of the actual regulations.
And if I can add to that, I think that, and I believe that Teresa mentioned this, and one of the areas people always say, what can we do to encourage economic development? And, the city, in the absence of a lot of discretionary spending, we can't do a whole lot through spending money, but what we do is build infrastructure. And so our infrastructure plans, our water, our sewer, our transportation plans really are that's the bulk of where you're going to achieve economic development, is coming up with achievable infrastructure plans. And so the work that's being done now on transportation, and even, I suppose, the parks plan makes the community more livable and makes it a more attractive place for people to move. But this is all about capital projects and which ones we put in the list, and making sure that there's a viable finance plan to support the projects we say that we're going to build to achieve these goals.
Nick, I have a question on the goal number 3. Who asked to have leverage the strength of national defense industry?
I believe that was either already in here or may have come as a suggestion when we met at the committee, Economic Development Committee with KEDA.
It is.
I think KEDA suggested that as a...
Okay. Personally, I would rather see it focused on all different job opportunities. And I appreciate that the military is a big factor in here, but I just hate to kind of focus your attention, whereas I think we need to look at any and all things to encourage job development, whether it's the defense industry or
so we could move that to a policy, but I think the way that it was worded with it's saying we want to diversify and actually become less reliant on the military at the same time that we harness the military as an asset. I think
I would just take the
leverage
the strength of national defense industry out of that sentence, and it would read just fine.
Okay. Everybody else? Incidentally, the joint land use study that's being conducted right now, the draft that came back with very few recommendations for things that Port Orchard could do, other than communicating better with the Department of Defense on projects that may potentially impact their operations. But other than that, I was pleased that most of what Port Orchard's doing is compatible, and that, I guess, ties into our connections theme a little bit. But
I'd like to see somewhere in here, and I know we have a transportation plan, but somewhere in here we need to have something like, there are 3 big companies that looked at Bethel that are not going to come here because Bethel's a wreck. And that's and those were big companies. And so I think somewhere in economic development goals, we need to be certain, you know, that our arterials are worthy.
We've got big companies looking at Sedgwick as well, and Sedgwick's, we brought that up before too. But I think, yeah, our commercial corridors probably need attention, and it may be worth mentioning that as a major goal in this. I don't know what.
I mean, Sedgwick's a lot better looking than Bethel is. I worry about my car.
So I had a question about wages under the economic development element, and it was the living wage target.
Mm-hmm.
And I was looking at that, and I was trying to figure out, okay, living wage target for, what, 2016? Or living wage target for 2035, or?
They constantly adjust.
And constantly adjusting living wage target?
And we included initially some work, some research on what is a livable wage, and it's not a fixed wage because it's totally dependent on your family size and other factors. And so a living wage for somebody who's got kids versus a living wage for somebody who's single are not the same thing. And so we thought about trying to define that in the plan, but ultimately moved away from that. But I think the goal maybe is that we don't want to become reliant totally on one industry like service jobs in the community. I think that would be, we need a diverse employment opportunities.
Passed down from DSRC?
I think this was from the community outreach, actually.
It was mentioned in the old plan too, but we didn't have any specific numbers associated with it.
I would just hope that our living wage minimum is at least minimum wage. Well, it's not in the...
That's a good point.
It's a good story.
2.7 people is what they say we have per household, is 2.7. And if you have one guy working, or one individual working in a household making minimum wage, you're gonna come up at just below the poverty level for that family. So a job, that's one of my big questions. What are we calling a job? Delivering newspapers, working at, pushing shopping carts around? Are they getting enough hours to live? Are they working 4 or 5 jobs? I mean, it all comes into play. And to say jobs doesn't really say anything.
Well, and there's no census of jobs. There are studies that have been done of the region, and there are consultants that are hired to put that thing together, but it's a really hard thing for us to quantify, and it's certainly something that we've never addressed as a policy of the city. And I was trying to stay away from any discussion of minimum wages or anything like that, which is a big national issue now. But that's entirely up to council if you want to go down that road.
It's an important point. I mean, not getting into the what's a minimum wage, but as a document and as a vision statement or as a goal, that's something that has to be considered if we're going to attract business, or what kind of business do we need so that people can make a living wage. So, I don't agree with $8.77 for an adult, but we'd obviously need some kind of a number so that we can encourage that base.
I don't know that we need a number, we need to take attract.
Yeah, I think the goal is
jobs to our community.
I think it's a general statement that you want to attract those types of jobs, and your policies should encourage, a diversity of job types and not get too specific.
We kind of did. Did we kind of address that with the city center idea, like the medical Tremont area would most likely support medical jobs, and Bethel corridor would most likely support box stores, and the downtown would be the mixed use. So we've probably already done that with the city center approach about what types of jobs or what types of development would go to those local centers.
All right, is there anything else from council or the planning commission before we take some public comments?
I guess I have a comment, and I'm not quite sure where it would best fit in the plan, but and I certainly understand and encourage the development of jobs in our community, but I think we should be also supportive of access 2 good-paying jobs. You know, we're not going to be able to provide, it'd be great if we could, but we're not going to provide all the jobs needed to support the residents in the city. So we should think about how we're encouraging or providing access to, or something that, I guess it might be the path. I mean, you could look at it from pedestrian paths or good access to transportation or a number of different aspects, but I think it's a goal that we need to also think about is encouraging access to economic centers, or however you want to put it.
Connectivity stuff.
Yeah. Now, whether it goes under the economic, I mean, it certainly does affect the economics of the city if you've got residents that are working in decent paying jobs, whether they're here or in Skia or Bremerton or Gig Harbor or wherever.
Well, and to continue John's thought of access to jobs, but taking it from another standpoint, I have employers right now that are beating down my door because they cannot find enough skilled workers to fill the positions that they have available here in our town. So I think increasing training opportunities, working other partnerships so that we can train the people who already live here to be able to get the jobs that already exist.
So would we like to see goals that recognize the need to provide access to jobs and
training?
And then training, yeah.
Jobs and job training. It encourages access to.
Okay.
Excuse me again. So the portion where it does say Port Orchard is adopting a living wage target, does the council not want that in there? Are we just gonna go with we'd like to make sure that we get well-paying jobs for everyone, or do we actually want a target goal?
I like the target goal personally. I'm not sure what that target is.
Well, that's what I was saying.
It's these numbers right
Define
here.
it.
Right, especially if it
No, I don't
every
like
year.
it. I think the low is too low. But,
Nick, could you,
Date on that?
Nick, could you define for the audience and perhaps the definition of a primary job as opposed to a living wage job, because they are definitely different?
Off the top of my head, no.
Okay, well, I believe a primary job is one that provides goods that are sold out of the area. And then the secondary jobs are those that provide services to our local residents.
Can either of those go out and buy a house that supports the home builders and business owners and?
But we do refer to both of those in the plan, primary jobs, and then we talk about secondary jobs, and we talk about living wage jobs, and they're all a little different.
So if there are no further comments from council, are there comments from the audience?
I said it last time about economic development in that, I don't know, maybe I didn't say it, maybe I can say it this time. You gotta make it easy for the businesses to survive, okay? You gotta make it easy for them to succeed. Drive down Bethel, try to make if you're driving south on Bethel, try to make a left-hand turn into some of those businesses. Or head north and try to make a right-hand turn. You can't do it, okay? The comment that Dick made earlier about turning on to Bethel, to Cemetery, you're taking your life into your own hands with those things. And people and businesses won't do business off of Bethel, like Ms. Paula said, that, if they're not gonna survive there because of access issues. So it all kind of goes all the way back again to the land use and the regulations that are made, to make it easy for businesses to succeed. Same thing with the signage issue, all right? Signage and driveways. Okay, driveways, access on and off the road. Widening Bethel, okay? Making Bethel a place where we can put businesses. And then as far as the wage is concerned, just like the housing situation is gonna be, it's gonna balance itself out, let the market take care of it. I mean, you can't plan a mobile home park, that's not what we want. You can't plan necessarily jobs that are gonna pay big bucks, all right? According to the plan here, our blessed friends at PSRC, you know, it's 2,000 jobs are gonna be created in finance, insurance, and real estate services. We already know where they're gonna come from, or where they're supposed to come from, okay? Only 211 new jobs over the next 25 years are supposed to come in the retail sector. Okay, this is supposed to be the roadmap. It says back here in the introduction that this is supposed to guide the regulations that you guys create over the course of the next 25 years. You need to make it easy for a business to succeed. And back to the sign issue, I understand that revising the sign code is nowhere on the horizon. That's what I've been told. Revising the sign code is nowhere on the horizon. No. And, you know, but you hear week after week, people come up here and tell you about the sign codes. The sign codes suck. Okay, I can't advertise my business. It's not on the horizon. It will not get fixed under the current administration or under the way things are being done now. Thank you.
I'll try to keep this kind of brief. I did a talk when I was the president of POPSA the last 3 years, and it's regarding a glass jar. Some of you might have heard that talk. And that is, I brought a glass jar, and I brought these big boulders, and I very gently placed them inside the glass jar. And then I asked everybody, is the jar full? Some say yes, some say no. But then I take a bunch of smaller rocks and pour it down over the large boulders, and it fills in the gaps. Is the glass full yet? It's really not, because I poured smaller pebbles in. Is it full yet? No, because I was able to pour sand down in those crevices. Is it full to the top? No, because then you can still pour water in it. My point was, it takes a lot of, you can never get the big boulders in later. You've got to make some tough decisions now, because you're never going to be able to put those big pieces in later on. And that's the problem that Port Orchard has on a lot of things downtown, is nobody wants to take that big leap and take that big boulder and move it and make a decision to get it, you know, moving forward. And regarding, that was just one point, but in this, number 2, provide public investment and stimulate private reinvestment downtown. Number 7, foster new development and remove obstacles. Number 8, enhance downtown as a center of activity. You know, we have at our doorstep an investor, you know, we had Bill Gates come into the town who wanted to buy up our town. We probably don't jump up and down because of that, or somebody else of that magnitude. We have that at our doorstep. We have an investor that's willing and ready to spend, you know, I can't speak for him and for his dollars amount, but I know it's going to take in the tunes of $20–30 million to do the developments that they want to do in downtown Port Orchard. In my personal opinion, we, and it's you, not me, it's we together as a city should be trying to remove those obstacles. You have some tough decisions ahead of you. But you guys, we should be standing up with pom-poms and flags, waving them in. Our community needs it. Our city needs it. Our tax base needs it. You as leaders need it to fix other problems. You need that tax base and that money to help us fix other infrastructure problems. I know it's a tough decision, and I know making that decision goes against the grain of what we have always dealt with over the past. And you have some tough decisions, but I think they're decisions that can help move us in the right direction.
Mike Eliason, Kitsap Realtors. A couple things to keep in mind. Although most communities are trying to recruit some big, wonderful family wage job company to come in, most efforts need, and the allocation of funds is towards that. Most communities benefit from the expansion of existing businesses. So I really appreciate what the gentleman mentioned earlier. Communicating with your business owners, find out what it takes, whether it's transportation, infrastructure, that type of thing. Also keep in mind, and you know, the impacts of affordability on all of the services you provide in King County. Prior to the recession, in fact, I probably shouldn't cite it today and get the percentages for you, but the percentage of your workforce is commuting to King County, that, in my opinion, is going to continue to increase. Right now in King County, the median price of a home is now higher than what it was prior to the recession. We've had 2 solid years of a marketplace. Right now, the median price in Kitsap's been hovering around $235, and that's thanks to South Kitsap. In my opinion, South Kitsap's the last bastion of affordable housing, and we thank you for that. In Silverdale, you're up to about $300,000 now. Bainbridge Island, $450,000. Other areas in North Kitsap are a lot higher. Bremerton and Port Orchard are the last strongholds, and we thank you for the efforts you do. And I didn't get a chance on the housing element, but I know you referenced the WAC. So just keep in mind when you discuss affordable housing, there's a difference between affordable housing and subsidized housing. And then another random comment is, depending on if we get passenger-only ferries through, I think, in fact, we just finished our state conference, and we had examples of offers on properties between 15 and 31 bona fide offers on single properties that come onto the market within a day. Now, if this marketplace continues, we know what's happening in King County. The balanced market is about 6 months. In Kitsap, we're at 2 months supply of homes and falling. We're hoping to see more inventory, but you're going to continue to see prices escalate. It's a really problematic marketplace. Thanks.
Thank you again, and I'm not going to repeat all the things that I've already said because pretty much my theme has been about economic development. The only thing that I wanted to add is that it's going to be very important that every jurisdiction in Kitsap ready themselves and do everything they can to make the development of land as streamlined as possible for exactly what Mr. Eliason is saying. Land development has become more difficult since the decline in the economy, not easier. There are more regulations. Stormwater in particular is very cumbersome. It's a long process. Most of the land that was left right before the collapse has now been reabsorbed and now built on. So we need to see land to be developed, and if it's not developed in a timely way, we will unfortunately see a run-up in the price of housing. This will be an unsustained increase in the price of housing. It will diminish affordability, not make it better, and it will perpetuate a cycle that we would rather not see. So if we can get land through the process quick enough, we can maintain a reasonable balance in the supply and demand curve and not have an artificial run-up in the price of housing. So a 2-month supply is a very, very problematic situation. It's all over Kitsap, it's all over the Puget Sound, and we've been working with the legislature to try to do some things, but I would encourage every local jurisdiction where you can to really be looking at ways you can streamline that process. Obviously staying within the bounds of the law, but trying to facilitate these land development processes to go forward quickly, because we really do not want to see an artificial uptick in those housing prices. We're also, the other side of that, just so you know, is we're not seeing a normal amount of existing housing stock on the market either. That's because, most likely, that those homeowners have done remodels to fall back in love with their homes at a time when they couldn't sell them. And many homeowners remain underwater, if you will, even with the improvements. Now, the more that properties do sell at a regular market rate, that will help every neighboring property to come up in value and make them more marketable. So we're seeing a lot of folks just not putting their homes on the market, and so that's exacerbated the problem. So just a little quick information there about how that works, and I would really encourage you to look at your land use permitting processes to make sure those are streamlined.
Cut here real quick. Let me say I forgot my point. Which I don't really do. I'm Norwegian.
Can you go to the mic and grab a mic?
Oh, sure.
Right there.
Just one last comment. just something to keep in mind, and I'm sure you know it, King County traditionally creates more jobs than housing. So basically, that's the result. It's simple supply and demand, and if you don't have the supply and you got the demand there. As I mentioned, we had houses on the market this last week that had 31 buyers write bona fide offers on one listing. Well, only one person can buy it, and so a lot of customers are getting frustrated. So what do? Realtors suggest they move to a neighboring community. So I think you're going to continue that. The marketplace continues this way. You're going to see more and more people come from King County and look at commuting.
So I know it's, we're about 20 minutes over, and I want to thank everybody for coming. This has been really helpful, and this will be the most rewatched city council meeting for me that I've ever been to, and I think Alan and Scott and I will pop some popcorn and probably sit down and listen once again and take notes. Our process going forward, we're going to be updating the elements that you looked at tonight based on the comments we've heard from council and citizens, and try to refine that as much as possible to get it into final draft form, and then wait for the completion of the other elements, the parks plan, the transportation, water, sewer, capital facilities, and wait for those elements. And we're going to be back here probably in August or September talking about having the same conversation concerning those elements. And once that's done, we're going to assemble it all into one draft document that can then be vetted all at one time towards the end of this year. So I hope if there's any other thoughts from the city council concerning the process or anything that you want, I know there was concern about the level of public outreach, and I hope that by recapping what we did to date and by having this additional process, we've satisfied your desire for that. I know that conducting a process is very time consuming and staff intensive, and we really don't have the resources to do a whole lot more than we're doing right now.
Tell me a little bit about that mind mixer.
Oh yeah, and then the other thing, you did approve the Mind Mixer contract last month. We're about to go live with that, and we're going to be able to do some additional public participation related to comp planning, specifically the parks plan, and then other issues of city importance. And so I think once you see that go live, we'll send out a link to everyone, and you can see what citizens are saying, share it on social media, and see if people you know want to comment or provide feedback. And hopefully it'll prove a good way to engage people who aren't able to come to these meetings, more so than we already have. Thank you. And I'll see some of you at 7:30 tomorrow morning. Finance